I'm going to be talking about an idea I have to help people. So I thought I might like dress nice. Maybe I should like wear glasses so that I look like, I don't know, professional. But I think it's better to just be chill. I might not start this idea I'm presenting. I might in the future. This is more of a idea to throw out into the world. Maybe this could be like how we help kids in the future, you know? I have a dream to help. And what is this dream? You may ask. This dream is to help kids get homes, because kids are the future of the world. We have to help them because the world is not, right now, the world is a little bit in turmoil, and the future generation, we need to help them because they're the people who are gonna carry on the future. Kids need homes. Why is this important? Or why do we need to talk about this? So, kids need homes to support a kid's growth, so that they can thrive in life. How can we do this? We can do this. We can help them thrive in life by helping improve their life outcomes and their quality of life. And what can we do to do this? We can give them a stable home, life skills, and community. Here's the problem. I'm gonna illustrate it for you guys here. So let's say you have a group of kids. I'll draw some kids. There you go. These are the kids. That kid just has a really long arm. Maybe he's meant for basketball, you know, just ignore it. But let's say you have this group of kids, right? In the foster care system, there are kids of all kinds, right? You got kids who are newborn babies. You have kids who are teenagers, 13 years old, 7 years old, 15 years old, 17 years old. So some kids in the system, in the foster care system, have been there for too long. These are the 17-year-olds. We can circle them. These guys are the 17-year-olds, right? Unfortunately, once they turn about 18, it might depend on certain things. Maybe it's 21 in some cases. But once they just age out of the system, they get kicked out of the foster care system, right? So now these guys, these 18-year-olds, young adults, are just on their own. Very unfortunate. This happens to about 18,000 teenagers or 17-year-olds or just kids who age out of the system every year, which is really bad because, as I said earlier, kids are the future, and if we're just dumping 18,000 of them out into the streets of the world without any help every single year, that's not really good. This means for these 18,000 kids, they don't find a family and they have to suffer a lot of challenges, such as, oh, sorry, right here. Kids who age out of the system, only 58% of them will graduate high school by 19, which is very sad, right? Fewer than 3% of them will end up getting a college degree by 25. Only 50% of them end up having a job by 24, and more than 1 in 5 of them will become homeless after turning 18, which is when they age out of the system. On top of that, 71% of the young women end up becoming pregnant by age 21, and that forces them into higher rates of employment, criminal conviction, needing public assistance, and becoming involved in the child welfare system. 81% of males who age out of the system get arrested within 6 years of aging out. And this is 59% in females who age out of the system within 6 years. All to say, the life outcomes for children who age out of the foster care system is very sad. And however, so despite these challenges that these kids are going through, if we can give them the stable life an adopted child or a child who grew up in a stable family gets to experience, it will dramatically improve their life outcomes. These are some of the improvements that they'll experience. They'll experience an increase in educational achievement, employment rates, wage earnings, tax revenue for the government, so it even benefits the country, housing security, mental health, and role model exposure. So they'll achieve better grades, maybe get into a college, maybe graduate from college. They'll have a higher chance of that. They'll have a higher chance of finding a job, higher chance of earning more, higher chance of contributing to the government's benefit, I suppose. Housing security, so they'll be able to find a house and not end up homeless, and they'll have like a more stable household. They'll have an increase in mental health. Here, I can have a laser pointer here so that I can show you guys what I'm pointing at. And they'll have a higher exposure to role models. So they'll have people to look up to and follow in their footsteps. They'll also experience a decrease in high school dropout rates, which is very good because, as we saw before, one of the challenges is that only 58% of them will graduate high school by 19. Joblessness, so though they experience higher employment rates, they will experience less poverty, less need for public assistance, less homelessness since they'll have more housing security, less rates of addiction to vices, and less unplanned pregnancy, which, as you saw in the examples before, a lot of women end up pregnant by 21 if they're part of this adoption system where they age out and don't get any help. And less interactions with the justice system, which could involve interactions with law enforcement or things such as that. All right, so these are some of the improvements that they can experience. Life outcome improvements, which is really good, right? All of this sounds really good. But how can we do this? Because all of this sounds great, but what can we do? Well, here's my idea. I'm gonna draw it out for you guys. It's not perfect, you know, I'm not like a super expert in this stuff. I just have ideas that I want to share, and hopefully they can help the world, or in the future maybe someone will see this and be like, that's a great idea, or maybe even I myself will be able to do this and someday in the future. You know, this is not meant to be political. I'm simply just sharing my genuine love for the people of the world and trying to help make the lives of today better tomorrow. Here's the idea. I have it here on the side for me to reference in case I need like some guidance. So let's say we have 3 residences, right? It could be like in one apartment. These could be like 3 apartments or 3 houses. I'm gonna say, for the sake of simplicity, that these are like 3 apartments within one building. You know, let's say it's a 3 apartment building, and these are the 3 apartments inside the building. You have these 3 residences. In each residence, you can have let's say a guidance counselor, or residence counselor or guardian. You have one of these residence counselors or guardians in each of these 3 residences. Also, just like as a forward, this idea I know is not perfect. It could need some improvements. It's super open to being changed and having improvements and things like that. You know, I'm just here to provide like a nice skeleton baseline idea. Of course, I have as many details as I can mapped out for it, but there's always room for more, you know? Always room for improvement, and no matter what we do in life, right? Everything can be improved at least a little bit. You have these 3 residences, each with a guidance counselor. In each of these residences, you can have maybe one, I'm going to draw them like this, 1 to 2, I'm going to label these as like R, right? These are R for the residence counselors. In each of them, you can have maybe 2 to 3 children, right? Okay, there we go. 2 to 3 children in each residence, right? Okay, very nice. Easy to follow so far. We have 3 apartments in one apartment building. Each one has 2 to 3 kids. Okay, optimally, you're able to pay these residence counselors like a good salary, right? Because you're basically telling them to take care of these children. So they should deserve like a good pay, since this is what they're doing as their job, right? Since it's also full-time raising these kids. The shift, or like the working hours for this, could vary between a lot of different models. It could be like maybe one of them works like half the week, the other work like the other half of the week, things like that. Or it could be they work full time and they can like have a super abundance of vacation days that they would cover. So like, let's say they have like 2 or 3 months of vacation, because they work full time, and then they like whenever they go on vacation, they coordinate amongst themselves to like maybe one kid goes here, the other kid goes to this apartment. Because one big thing about this is that they would all be working together as a community. Since they're all in the same building or very close to each other, they would all be able to interact with each other. Let me explain what I mean. Also, a good maybe starting salary would be maybe like 75K, especially since all of them would have housing covered, right? They wouldn't be paying for housing. The organization that would be running this would be paying for things like that, for housing, and most likely for food as well, because they'd likely go grocery shopping on their own. That would be like something they could help like teach the kids, but they would be given a stipend specifically to help them for that. So that 75K or whatever they earn is specifically for themselves, which is great when you don't have to pay for housing. So and it can be raised higher over time. We want to make sure that these guidance counselors are paid very fairly, especially since they're dedicating their lives to this, or just a large amount of time to this. And yeah, and it could be also very similar to in like how in Finland, I'm not sure if you guys know this, Finland. I'm gonna just write it over here. In Finland, you need a master's degree to be a teacher. So it's very difficult to become a teacher, from my understanding, in Finland, which would be and these residence counselors would have a similar standard held to that, since we're trusting these guidance counselors to help raise these children for a long time, right? Optimally for a long time. And that's how you would kind of incentivize or encourage them to like help for a long time, right? You give them a nice stable life where they earn a lot, housing is covered, food is covered, and at the same time they can focus their responsibilities on helping these children thrive in life. So the main responsibility that these guidance counselors would be in charge of would be to, of course, take care of the children, but they would do this by every morning they would drive them to school. Of course, they would drive them to the local public school, right? They would pick them up from school in the afternoon. They would help them with homework, right? Optimally, they'd help them with homework. They would take them to extracurricular activities after school. So one good thing that provides enrichment to children is having like an extracurricular activity. We're not trying to push them to be like super overachieving, ambitious people. If they want to be that, that's amazing. That's great. But, you know, we would just we would have them encourage the kids to at least have one thing that they can have outside of school. It could be something like karate, or like, let's say they join like the math club or science club, or a sport. It could be anything like that. On top of this, the residence counselors would teach them important life skills, things like cooking. I'm going to draw an egg here for cooking, and maybe like a pan, right? A pan with an egg. Is that a good pan with an egg? Anyways, so I could sizzle a little bit. Okay. So they would teach them things like cooking, how to clean, and do chores. This would be very like helpful, right? For them to just grow as independent individuals who can one day be able to live on their own, cook and clean for themselves, right? So this could be done in many different ways. It could be like structured, where they have every child is at least assigned like one cleaning duty every week, and maybe once or twice a week they can get into like a group with the guidance counselors, or even the other, you know, they have a lot of apartments that they can like interact with, right? So they could either get together as a giant group, cook a big meal every few days, that, you know, because leftovers last like a day or two before you have to cook another big meal. So Yeah, things like this. They could get into groups, cook together, and then eat, get together again, cook again. That would teach them a lot of just cooking skills because they could cook a lot of different things. On top of this, they could have community events where they like get together with these other apartments, right? And do something. Maybe like once a week or every 2 weeks, they could go do like a big group activity. Like they could go to the movies, go to a picnic, just something fun that would help like encourage interaction between the different kids, help them just enrich their lives with just a little community there. They could even just have study sessions where they get together after school every night, or like after or like once a week every night, where they just study, focus on their schools, things like that. And there's also many different variations of this setup possible, right? It could be 2 to 3 residence counselors in a single home, with like 6 kids maybe. There's a place in Connecticut called the Boys and Girls Village, which does a somewhat similar thing where, you know, they help the kids thrive in life. That's their goal. And so this is one portion of the idea. So there could be many different setups of this kind of thing, but the general idea is that there's a caretaker with a group of kids, and they're in a community of other caretakers with groups of kids working to improve those children's lives. And the caretakers are incentivized to stay by giving them very good benefits and good pay, since they're dedicating a lot of time to this. So each child will optimally be given access to, well, not optimally, each child will have access to a tutor, right? A tutor who can help them either, well, you know, the tutor could help them with things such as homework, with math skills, or science or writing or whatever they need to do. Or this could be a tutor who helps them with things that they're interested in, such as their extracurriculars. It could be painting, piano, swimming, karate, writing, reading, anything that they want, right? But they'll also teach responsibility, creativity, and reduce their opportunities for delinquency, right? And some of these tutors may just be the teachers that they have at their extracurriculars, right? Like, let's say I keep using this karate example, right? I'm gonna draw like, I did karate when I was a kid for like a few months or a year. I meant to draw a hand chopping, but that's not a hand. Anyways, so let's say they do karate. At the karate dojo, there's going to be, or a karate school, there's going to be a teacher, right? And, or the sensei. And the sensei will be their tutor, right? They'll teach them lots of things, like how to do the techniques correctly, things like that. And optimally provide them guidance to just help teach them responsibility, reduce opportunities for delinquency, and teach them responsibility and creativity. Residence counselors could also provide them help with homework and things as like that. And there could be dedicated study and homework times that will allow the children to work on their education and just help each other out with their assignments in a collaborative space, so students can become mentors for each other, and things like that. They could even just work together. Maybe they're in the same classes, since they're all going to the same public school. And this is really important because children are literally the embodiment of the future. So by helping them do this and thrive, this could help the world in general, since you're improving these young minds and young lives to go out into the world and do great things. So I have an example here of the residence counselors. So if you have 3 residence counselors, and you give them all maybe 2 to 3 months of vacation time or whatever amount seems appropriate. I arrived at 2 to 3 months of vacation by thinking, since this is a full-time job, especially if your literal job is to be a full-time parent, then maybe 1 week off per month is like more than well deserved, right? Optimally, they'd coordinate amongst themselves to take care of each other's children when they're out on vacation, and they'll spread the workload evenly, like maybe one child per counselor. And like if they're like, let's say they have two and they're going on vacation, one counselor could get the other one, the other could get the other. And optimally, the counselors will all be able to support each other and work as a community of parents for the children to rely on. The village raises the child much better than an individual can, right? A lot of people working together could help. I remember there is like a study where if you have a village of people working together to raise like the young children of the village. And that way the children, even if they might not get along so well with one of the adults, there's going to be another adult that they will get along. They have a higher chance of finding an adult that they do get along with that can guide them, even if one of them fails to be like a good model for them. Not that these residence counselors would necessarily fail at doing stuff, but by having a community, it gives them more opportunities to find people that they click better with, right? Let's see. Oh yeah, so it would optimally require a master's degree, but it would at least require a bachelor's degree for this. Something that is like perhaps in like education, since they'll be helping the kids, or something with like residence management, like how the people who manage those residence dorms in colleges, some of them have degrees that are like specific to helping council residences, things like that, or that help them. They have like specific degrees that help them manage like residences for adults or things like that. It doesn't have to be adults, it could be children. So these children will be part of a community that works together to take care of a living space, right? A shared, since they're let's say there's like 3 kids in one apartment, they would be working together to take care of this shared living space that the residence counselor is managing with them here, which would teach them a lot of responsibilities, because they'll have to cook dinner together every few days under the guidance of the residence counselor. They'll each be assigned a weekly cleaning, and they'll have meetups with children from the other apartments to go play or study or go on trips. And as I mentioned before, those trips could be like the museum, the park, the movies. All right, so there is one issue that you may be thinking of right now, as of now, right? So, and that issue is money. Because you're probably thinking, how are you going to pay for all this? You mentioned $75K per teacher. How are you going to do that? Or $75K per residence counselor, plus you're paying for their housing? How are you going to do that? True, right? Because I personally, even though I would love to do something like this, I can't afford that, right? So the idea for funding this would boil down to something similar to endowments. So if you're not sure what an endowment is, there's lots of different kinds of endowments, but a good example is like a school, right? Let's draw like a little school here, or like a university. Let's say this is like Harvard, right? So what Harvard has, or a lot of universities, doesn't have to be Harvard, okay, but what a lot of them have is something called an endowment, and there's different kinds, but basically it's an investment that the school holds and they have this investment here in like a pool or something, or just in their account, their portfolio, whatever, and they use that investment to fund their like activities or costs indefinitely, right? So let's say they have it invested in something like the S&P 500 and real estate and like just like a whole bunch of stuff, right? So they have like real estate, maybe they have, yeah, just a whole bunch of stuff. So okay, so they have it in all these investments, and basically these investments are usually very safe and they're often guaranteed to grow, right? So let's say it's the S&P 500, that I think the average is like grows 12% on average every year or something for the past many years. So with that 12%, if it's a little bit of money, it might not be a lot. It might not feel like a lot, right? Like if it's like 100,000, 12% of 100,000 is gonna be 12,000, which is not enough to pay the teachers, or if they cost 75,000. But if this was a million, right? As if I could just pull a million from my pocket. That'd be the dream, right? Okay, so if it's 12% of a million, right? That would be 120,000, which could pay one teacher and like perhaps even rent a whole apartment for a year, right? The funding of these ideas would boil down to endowments, which is the same way that colleges fund themselves. An endowment is a fund established with the goal of providing a long-term support for an organization or cause. The fund is usually born from donations, like this initial investment, and they use it to generate income while also growing the initial investment in math. So they have their investments, in these safer assets in order to generate income from them. It could be off like the 12% growth, it could be interest, it could be a lot of things. So here's a slightly novel idea. Not novel, but just maybe it's not done so often. So this idea, right? Let's say you want to start an endowment fund, right? But we don't have millions of dollars, right? Because if we wanted to do a lot of stuff, we'd need a lot of money. But we don't have a lot of money. So let's say you do this through a high yield income dividend stock, right? So let's take something like something that's been becoming really popular recently is a stock like ULTY, right? I've been seeing like a bunch of stuff about ULTY, which is a income ETF by YieldMax. And when I was researching and doing these things, it cost about $6 per share, but now I've seen it has gone down. But basically, the stock focuses less on growth, and so it's mostly kind of stable going down. But what it focuses on in exchange for this growth is income, right? So that's the difference. So instead of it making you money by growing in value, it's making you money by just providing more income. However, these stocks, these income paying stocks, since they're relatively new, they're riskier, right? So let's say with some good luck and good thinking, we managed to scrape up $1 million over time or through a donation or something like that, right? With just $1 million, I say just $1 million as if it's as if we could just have that. But okay, with just $1 million in ULTY, if it was $6 per share, right? Each share pays about, or at the time that I had researched it, pays about 10 cents. but I think now it's about 9. All right. So it pays about 10 cents. So if it was still $6 and paid 10 cents, we would be making with the $1 million 16,000, about 16,000 a week, right? Or it's, to be more exact, it was 16,667 a week, right? And then, so that's a lot of money. A week, that's kind of crazy. And optimally, this is under a nonprofit structure, right? So none of this would be taxed. And then for a month, it would end up being about 600 or 66,667 a month, right? So this is per week, and this is per month, which is insane, right? Which ends up being 866,667 per year. That seems like a lot more promising, right? That seems like a lot more promising to pay 3 residence counselors plus rent 3 apartments and give them a food stipend, right? Plus pay for these kids like extracurricular activities. That's a good amount. That's a very nice amount. But it's a lot of money and it's a little bit risky, right? So because these are somewhat less safe than traditional investments used in endowments, we probably shouldn't dump all our $1 million that was donated or like scraped up into this, right? We probably shouldn't dump all of it into this. However, well, I say probably, but definitely not. I even wrote that here. I said, and by probably not, I mean, we should definitely not put all 1 million if that's all we have. All right, maybe if we had 2 million, right? But okay, so instead we should stick to at least a few safe options. So so there's this common strategy that's done in investing where they split their portfolio, right, into some risky stocks and some safe ones. So let's say 50% is in the S&P 500, or even 60 or 70%, and then they'll have 50 or 40 or 30% into something more risky, right? And then let's say it's like 50-50, 50 in the S&P 500 and 50 in like a risky stock, like let's say it's ULTY if it's considered risky here. Then what you do is over time, as everything pays more, right? Since this is since the S&P 500 is slowly growing, like part of your portfolio is slowly growing, and the ULTY part of your portfolio has some leftovers after this, you can slowly increase the amount that you have in the S&P 500 or safer investments and decrease the amount you have in ULTY or the more risky investments. So it could be something like you have 50% in something like VOO and 50% in something like ULTY. Or it could even be 60 or 70%, right? If that was the case, then this would be 40 or 30, right? And this would optimally grow, and this would optimally slowly over time decrease. Or it could stay the same if there's enough that this would be like safe and sustainable. Like if let's say this was more than $1 million, then this could still work if this is enough, if 30% is enough to be a lot. I wrote for some reason I wrote here, with that delicious combo, we now have an endowment fund. If we're going off this 400, let's take this middle middle option here, right? Okay, let me clear this. If we take that middle option where it's 40% and 60%, and we have 1 million, then that means that 400,000 and 600,000, I don't know why I put a comma there, right? That's what it would be split into. This would be in a safer stock, like let's say the S&P 500, and this would be in a riskier one, like ULTY. With that, we now have the 400. I had looked up how fast VOO grows, 14.64% per year. So this is growing at 14% a year. While this, assuming a ULTY at this time cost $6, this would be paying us 10,000 per week or 4,000 per month, which is 520,000 per year. Still a lot, right? Thanks to this mix of ULTY and the S&P 500, or in this case 14.64% that came from VOO, which is which is based off of S&P 500. So this 520K per year would be enough to pay 3 residence counselors. I had written here that it could be about 65K per year to begin, and then we could raise it to something higher later, because 65K plus having room and board covered for can be a pretty good amount, right? So let's say it's like 55 to 65. I'm gonna write 65 here, 65K per year, which ends up being 195K. Yeah, 195K per year, right? Sorry if my handwriting's not amazing. I'm trying to write with a mouse. So on top of insurance and things like that, which I tried to account for, that would be plus 18K with insurance. Like if we have to cover, since we'll have to cover that for them, you know, we gotta give them a good reason to stay, right? We can't just give them some bad stuff. We gotta give them benefits too, right? Then the cost of raising a child is about 20,000 per year, right? So the cost of raising 6 kids, let's say we're starting off small with 2 kids per 3 apartments, right? So if we have 2 kids in each apartment, then that would be 6 kids, right? And 20,000 times 6 is gonna cost us about 120K total per year to help the kids, to help raise the kids, right? And let's say you have to give those kids insurance too, right? You can't just leave them. You gotta help the kids. You gotta give them insurance. Let's say it's about, I wrote here 7,500 per year. Also insurance. All right, that doesn't look like I wrote insurance, but I promise I was trying to write it. Okay. Plus rent for a 2-bedroom apartment. Let's say you're renting 3 2-bedroom apartments in, let's say, an urban area, costing about, let's say, 2,500 each per month. So you have these 3 apartments, right? Let's say each one is 2-bedroom. The kids can have their own room, the residence counselor can have their own room, right? So if each one of these rooms costs 2,500 in like a somewhat urban area, right? Then that means that each room, 25 times 12, is gonna give us 30,000 a year is the cost of each room, which is gonna make this come out to 90K per year, right? Okay, so you have this 90K per year in rent. All right. And then we include things like groceries. So let's say groceries are for each group, let's say it ends up being 1,000 per month. So 12,000 per year for each group or for each of these like apartments. So let's say it's 12,000 per year. Let's say 1,000 per month for each one, right? That brings us to 36K, because 12 times 3 is 36, so 36,000. So rent plus 36,000. In total, the grand total of all this, right? This plus this plus this is going to be 466.5K per year, right? That, if you notice, is less than this over here, than the 520K per year that we're making from this ULTY. So that leaves you with 53.5K per year that you could use for emergencies, unexpected costs, improving the system, growing the endowment fund, things like that. So, some differences from regular foster homes / group homes that you will notice in this system, or in this idea that I've presented, is that compared to foster homes and group homes, this program would optimally, or this program will be focused on giving them a permanent residence until early adulthood, at least until the focus would be on up until hopefully college graduation or a few months after, so that they could find a job for job acquisition instead of a temporary resting spot, right? So it wouldn't just dump them out onto the streets like how the system does when they age out. This one would optimally give them a chance to have better life outcomes like the ones we described up here. So it would increase their educational achievement, increase employment rates. Even if they didn't necessarily go to college, it could encourage them to go to a trade school where they could also do well, and things like that. So instead of a temporary resting spot, it's a place where they could thrive and optimally support a kid's growth so that they can thrive in life by helping them improve their life outcomes and quality of life, by giving them a stable home, life skills, and community. And so, in the end, they'd experience all these improvements. This would be how we fund it. And these are some of the sources if you're interested in checking it out. Also, I did have chat open, but I wasn't able to look at it. So sorry. Sorry if I didn't notice it at first. So let me read what you guys have been saying in chat. Okay, so here in chat we have NK Preddy says, "Whoa, hello, I like turtles." And the Great Potat Zarin says hi. And Cacophony says, "Adults can't even afford houses though." And Cacophony says, "US treasuries too, probably." Very true. Adults also can't even afford houses, which is another idea I have, but I won't present it today. But basically, the start of this presentation, this might be like a little series I do where I have a dream to help, and then the next topic, instead of kids need homes, will be adults need homes, because we also can't afford housing. So, and for that, I have a similar idea to things like boarding houses, meant that are like dedicated for young adults to get like their, like just to hit the ground running. It'll be affordable, maybe offer some food, and it could just help them kind of hit the ground running with their career so that they can like be able to self-sustain themselves. So they'd be able to live there for at least in their like young 20s, I think, or early 20s, mid 20s, until they can stabilize things. And yeah, and also you're right, US treasuries too would also help keep that endowment fund nice and funded if we did it that way. And all right, so thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening. That was my presentation for the day. Let me check on Twitch if anyone had some questions. And also to everyone who stuck around to watch and hear me present this, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you as always. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate all your time. I hope you have a beautiful day. And thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a beautiful day. Thank you so much.